Welcome, fans of the Justice League universe. My name is Sam.
And my name is Sydney.
And we are two members of the JLU podcast team who enjoy analyzing the DC films from Warner Brothers Studios. Other contributors to this analysis are Alessandro Maniscalco and Rebecca Johnson.
You can find us all on Twitter individually, and you can follow the show at JLU Podcast.
In this episode, we are going to discuss Scene 6 of Justice League, which is the scene where Bruce debriefs with Alfred after his attempt to recruit Arthur Curry. And so they're on that airplane, which we'll talk about in a bit. But we'll start with some overarching purposes for the scene or themes or character development that we see happening. I mean, for me, this is kind of one of those exposition scenes where they really want to just put some information out there about the characters that we're going to be seeing in the next scenes, like a little bit of a tease about The Flash and a little bit of tease about Cyborg, because those are coming up next.
Right.
So definitely some exposition for that. But what else do you see in this scene, kind of taking the broad view of it?
Well, it ties in with a major film theme, which is, Bruce is going to say it outright later on, but, it's, we don't recognize this world, but we don't have to recognize it. We just have to save it. It's a similar theme to Wonder Woman, actually. Yeah,
that there's a lot going on in the world. The world is a big, complicated place, and there's sometimes a lot of negativity, violence, anger, that sort of thing. Stuff that you don't recognize or stuff that's different than what you're used to.
Metahumans, for one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but even with all of that, it's worth saving the world. It's worth trying to give the world a future so that it can hopefully, grow and get better.
Right, and it definitely shows a big change for Bruce, because that entire mentality is pretty much the opposite of where he was at in the beginning and middle of Batman v Superman.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and with Bruce as well, I agree that's kind of a bigger arc for him. And even in this movie, we're seeing him have to learn how to, make new friends.
Right.
If you have children, some of them make new friends very easily, but others, they kind of have to learn and have advice on how to make new friends. And for him, he's really talking to Alfred as
his only friend.
Yeah, how are we going to get this team together? Did you talk to this person yet? Maybe you could try this person. So it's kind of funny in that sense, but it is character growth for Bruce. He has Alfred, of course, as his kind of partner in this endeavor and a voice of wisdom and insight. But really, they're trying to figure out, if we can find some playmates for Bruce, because he's been pretty, lonesome. And in the last movie, he was very isolated,
Right. And I mean, this is true to the comics as well, because even in the comics, when he's surrounded by, the Bat family, Nightwing and Batgirl and all of them, those are the moments where Bruce is at his most lovable, but he's still a very, I guess, prickly person. He doesn't play well with others, and he's not very good at showing how he feels or being friendly. So You can see him in this movie making attempts, but it's always going to be a weird thing for him.
Mm-hmm. It really is part of the character, not just the comics, but so I do have young kids, and so we even watch the Lego DC superheroes movies. So there's the Lego Batman movie, but then there's even the direct-to-video, home release ones that are pretty fun, especially for kids.
Yeah.
But even in those ones, they will make a character arc for him about, not really knowing how to be friends with the Justice League.
Right.
He's a great companion in a fight, or if he needs to strategize or plan for the team. But they even play that up in those Lego movies, that he doesn't quite know how to have just the personal bond with the other Justice League members.
Right, and I prefer, I definitely prefer the darker, grimmer Batman of the comics and Batman v Superman, but I actually really liked Lego Batman movie for just that reason, because it was a parody. But the idea that Bruce is difficult and, kind of emotionally constipated and has a hard time connecting with others, that's totally real and true to the comics.
Mm-hmm. All right, so let's go through the scene in a little bit more detail. So it starts with an establishing shot where we see the airliner going by. So assuming this is actually a private jet, although it's a pretty big one, I guess that's fitting for a Bruce Wayne.
Billionaire, yeah.
And then I thought it's kind of funny. I didn't notice this until I was just getting ready for this conversation. But when we cut into Bruce, we can hear the water trickling in the sink. And then he's shaving there. But I actually like the water transition, because we just came from Aquaman diving into the water.
Oh,
and
yeah.
It was all about Aquaman. And then we're pulled into this scene actually with water running. So It's just a very small little touch. But when I noticed it, I kind of got a smile on my face.
Oh, yeah, I hadn't noticed that before. That actually is kind of cool. And Bruce is looking good here. It kind of looks like a Razor commercial. It definitely shows that a little bit of time has passed since he met with Arthur.
Yeah, and they have him shaving off, so that explains why he's clean-shaven after this. So they gave a little bit more attention to continuity with the beard coming off than they did with the beard growing on, because he didn't have a beard. We talked about it when we analyzed the previous scene, but that beard sort of came out of nowhere because he said he was going there tonight or something like that. He had the beard.
They could have said it was a fake beard or something for a disguise, but then they had to have him shave it off here, so...
Yeah.
Oh, well.
But going forward, I'm not too much of a continuity, Hawk kind of thing, so I'll notice it sometimes, but it's not a big deal to me. But from this point on, we can just go, okay, he's clean-shaven, so no, we don't have to worry about that anymore.
Right.
Now, that introduces Bruce, but then Alfred gets to come into the scene as well.
Yeah, and his introduction, it's actually I think a really cool panning shot as Alfred is walking up the cabin there. Just the light coming from the windows behind him, it creates this nice flare, and I think it's actually a really impressive shot.
Yeah, and I like how he starts framed on the left, but then once he gets into the kind of room where the most of the scene will be, he ends up kind of on the right side of frame. So it's kind of just a nice use of space as well.
Right.
Now, you noticed something that I totally missed. How did you catch this, and what did you notice?
Oh, just complete coincidence. I think I was just, I was looking specifically in the background for some details. So I just noticed that, so once Bruce and Alfred start talking about Lex Luthor's notes, Bruce has a pile of papers kind of on the couch there. And one of them, it's sort of underneath a bunch of other papers that have sketches of mother boxes. But it is a heavily annotated map of Belgium, which we know as a location from the Wonder Woman movie. Mm-hmm. And it is presumably, I guess, a location where Etta and the Oddfellows found the mother box, the one that I guess eventually finds its way over to America and is used to create Cyborg. So Bruce has done a very thorough investigation of all these people.
Yeah, that's interesting. So later when Cyborg explains kind of for the audience's benefit, but also the other Justice League members, he says the mother box was found by the British after World War I or something like that. So that's a reference to Etta. But actually, Bruce would have already known that. So that's really cool that Bruce's, detective investigation skills already paid off even a century before.
Right. So just some little background details. They don't spell out every single step of his investigation, but clearly it is wide-reaching.
Yeah. And he also, when he was looking back there in, World War I era, he found the original photo of Diana and the Oddfellows. So he was, pretty thorough in a lot of regards for that era.
Yeah, he probably tried to investigate everybody in the photo.
Yeah, and that's a nice connection, really, between this movie and the Wonder Woman movie. But this scene is not quite as coherently connected to some of the trailer material that was released for Justice League. Because people looking at the trailers noticed that there seemed to be a scene where Bruce was debriefing about Arthur Curry with Diana. This was where in the trailer he says, Diana asks him how did it go, and he says, more or less, and she's like more or more less, and he's like more or less.
Right.
So there was that whole banter where they showed the whole banter in the trailer. So that seems like it must have been, Bruce coming back from trying to get Arthur and getting thrown up against the wall. And then he's talking to Diana about how it went. But now in the theatrical release, he's doing this whole conversation, a different conversation, but he's talking to Alfred about, how it went with Arthur Curry. So there's definitely the point at which Diana and Bruce linked up and started being a partner, maybe was shifted around, but we can't really know for sure. But it's just that is definitely something we can point to because it was explicitly in a trailer. Right,
and I remember looking out for that scene, so I was a little disappointed when it didn't happen. But I don't know necessarily that this scene replaced that one. I think timeline-wise, he could have done this debriefing with Alfred, and then when he returned to Gotham, done the debriefing with Diana, which maybe would be kind of redundant. So you might only need one to have a coherent story.
Yeah.
Going with the scene with Alfred here, I think was important because it is some continuity with Batman v Superman, which showed that Alfred was the one that Bruce bounces his ideas off of, and you know, they have this long working relationship together. So it definitely gives Alfred something to do in a film that is mostly dominated by these powerful superhuman characters.
Yeah. And Alessandro noticed like the clothing that Diana is wearing seems to be the same clothing that she is wearing when she walks up to the Batcave. That seems to match the clothing that she wears with the more, less scene. Mm-hmm. So Alessandro says like it's not necessarily contradictory. Like you said, it might be like a double debriefing of how Aquaman is going in terms of recruitment or whatever. But if it is both, then I can see why it was edited out for time, because it's like, yeah, we already debriefed that, so we don't need it twice. So
right.
I can kind of understand that. Although I did like the interaction between Bruce and Diana in that trailer scene.
Right.
But speaking of Aquaman, so Alfred, in his debriefing of it, he says, like, we have no way of reconnecting with this Aquaman, which that made me think about how, we mentioned Bruce's research into the past and stuff, but it also made me realize, like, wow, it takes a lot of work to know where one of these metahumans is going to be so that you can actually be there to try to, like, interact with them or run into them.
That's how they've managed to stay hidden this long.
Mm-hmm. All the work to like find out about the king tide, and then he goes to help that village, and then you have to get there on time, for it. So a lot of work goes into just running into them, and then when that chance is gone, you don't know when your next chance might come around. This also is making me realize for the first time that it doesn't quite make sense in scene 2 when Batman says, let's go north tonight to find Aquaman, basically. Because if it has to be the king tide in this particular village at this particular time, it seems like he would have already had it on the calendar. Like, that's when we need to go to Iceland.
Right.
So it doesn't really make sense that it would be like a spur of the moment, like, all right, let's head north. It seems like it would have been a very planned, like, no, this is our one chance to try to meet him, is because he might be in this village at this specific time.
Right. Well, it's king tide. I don't know if that would refer to a very specific moment in time. Maybe he figured he had a window. In any case, having your own private jet certainly helps if you're making spur-of-the-moment trips to Iceland.
Yeah, so it didn't go well with Aquaman, and so we get the joke about the tracking device in his coat, and I think that's nice where he says it may not have been his coat. Thought that's a good little bit of humor, and a good spot to have humor, because this is kind of a decompression sort of scene. Mm-hmm. So I thought that was good, but it also, for me, there's just this sense of, like, Aquaman is going to be the reluctant to join team member. And so it's going to take something extra for him to actually change his mind and join. And later, that ends up being like actually Steppenwolf coming down to Atlantis and taking that mother box. And then even that doesn't really get Aquaman to join the League. It's really talking to Mira. So it's like both of those things have to happen. So at this point, Bruce doesn't know what's going to happen with Aquaman. He thinks it's probably a dead end. But some stuff will spur Aquaman on so that he does come around later.
Right. I mean, he doesn't know Bruce. He has no reason to trust him.
Yeah, definitely not. So one thing that this scene does that many other scenes also do is just lots of explicit references to the squares or the boxes or the containers of some kind. So here they talk about maybe they hold money, power, something worth starting a war over. So they're definitely trying to make sure the audience can't miss this. They need to hear about those boxes, several times already, even just by scene 6.
Here's lots of drawings of boxes.
Yeah, and the parademon exploded with the boxes, and then the boxes were inserted into the Iceland city. So you'd have to be a pretty dense audience member to not get a clue about these boxes.
Just to make sure that you know that the magical, powerful-looking cube the guy holds later on is important.
And if you still haven't gotten it, then Diana is literally going to explain it to you at a scene later. So.
Right. I mean, obviously there needs to be an explanation, but I think the least impressive thing about it is that it's shaped like a box.
And earlier he'd call it boxes, and then with the papers that Alfred has and stuff, they're clearly drawn as 3-dimensional cubes. So for me, I'm in math education and mathematics, and so I know a lot about the research on kids learning shape names. And one common problem that happens is kids and even adults will call a cube a square, and they will kind of conflate 2-dimensional shapes with 3-dimensional shapes. So for me, it's something that sticks out to me, because at this scene when Bruce brings it up, he says, those squares in Luther's notes. Now, Luther might have drawn it as a square sometimes in his notes, but Bruce seems to know that they're actually not squares, they're actually cubes or boxes. So I thought it was like a little weird that he slips and calls it a square, because Bruce also seems like a pretty smart guy who does know the difference between 2 dimensions and 3 dimensions. But that's probably something that only a like math person or maybe a math educator would notice.
Well, it's a similar shape, just separated by 1 dimension. But he definitely has seen one before, unless he somehow hasn't connected that these things are the same as the mother box that we saw in the Cyborg footage from Batman v Superman, the one that was in Luther's files.
Yeah, I don't think he has totally made that connection, because if so, that would give him more information about what sort of power it has, like, because he still seems to be like, maybe it's money, maybe it's power, something really important. And if he had connected it and realized that it is that thing from the Cyborg footage, then he would know it's some sort of kind of technology that's able to like save a life or, that sort of thing. He would know it's not, right. He would know it's not money, at least.
Right. I think in this entire scene, the way they talk about Victor and the way they talk about Barry, they're being kind of, I think, vague about what their powers are like. And I think it's more, they don't have enough information so that they don't want to jump to conclusions. They clearly know that there's something strange about these people, and that's why they're investigating them. But even in Batman v Superman, we saw that Luther, he had a lot more information about these metahumans than just the short clips that we saw. But they're not necessarily very clear. I mean, we're going to see it on screen again in very soon in this scene, like with Barry showing him stopping the bank robber. So there's definitely more footage than that, but just like in that footage, you don't necessarily get a clear shot of him using his speed powers. Mm-hmm. So I think Bruce and Alfred, they just don't want to jump to conclusions. I think this whole thing about the Speed Force just seems too insane. Yeah. And they have to see it firsthand. Right.
So speaking of Barry Allen, so that's the next main part of the scene here is we get a little bit of info about Barry and a little bit of info about Vic. So Alfred has found this Barry Allen, and there's some nice dialogue here, because Alfred says he's completely off the grid. He's probably squatting or something. But he says, he moves suddenly and often, mm-hmm. which is this nice kind of double meaning. He's moving around, but he also moves suddenly, like, somebody with the Speed Force might do.
Right, and I guess what I was saying is, so do they honestly not know? Or is he purposely making a pun there?
Yeah, is it a pun just for the audience, or is it actually something that Alfred is saying, like, on purpose?
Right, like clearly they've picked up on the fact that, okay, he moves around a lot, and he's very good at not being seen, but have they put that together with he has super speed? Mm-hmm. Like, I would think that they would have to know, based on the information they have.
I mean, the convenience store, it's not exactly clear what happens, but it seems to be, you can tell he is moving, so
right.
They seemed like they would have some sort of indication, but you're right, they're probably they're not going to jump to conclusions. They're going to really weigh the evidence and think about what do we know for sure.
Right. One kind of strange thing about it is something I noticed this time around was when they show the convenience store footage in this movie, in this scene here, I don't know if this is significant, but we see the footage up until the moment where he uses his super speed to stop the robber. So for some reason in the footage here, we don't actually see that. So it kind of made me think, and maybe this is pessimistic for me to think, but it could be that they changed things around a bit so that it's more plausible to think that Bruce and Alfred wouldn't necessarily know that he has super speed. That doesn't entirely sit well with me, so there's probably nothing to it. It's just in the background, and you're not supposed to think about it like that. Mm-hmm. But, I just kind of thought that the way that they talk about it seems odd here. Mm-hmm. But it could just be, yes, they don't want to jump to conclusions. Clearly, this guy is doing something strange, but this is, it's something real. This is, I mean, we're used to comic books and we're used to someone having strange powers, but if you think about it in a more real world way, if something strange is happening in reality, you're not automatically going to assume, oh, this person has super speed, or oh, this person's an alien, or something like that. You would try to, I think, dig up more evidence before making that kind of outrageous claim.
Yeah, it's what great claims require great evidence or whatever. Yeah,
exactly. Which is why they need to find them and actually witness him use his abilities firsthand.
Yeah, and when Barry does catch the Batarang and stuff, it seems like that is the moment where Bruce is like, okay, confirmed, like, you are really fast. But I think Bruce knew that he has some sort of speed power or whatever, and that's why he threw the Batarang at him. But it was only after he caught it that Bruce is like, okay, now I see more what I'm dealing with, you know.
Exactly. And I'm sure you'll talk about this when you get to that scene, but, you know, he almost kind of sounds like he doesn't quite believe it when he says, so you're fast. Mm-hmm. Like, yeah, I think he knew, but didn't want to say it out loud. Not yet.
Yeah, and the other information we get from Alfred here in the exposition is that Barry Allen visits his father, who is in prison, and the father is in prison for killing his mother. So I think this is it gives us some crucial information about the character of Barry Allen and the origin story, but it's very vague, right? So like if you know the comic books or if you know the Flash TV show or whatever, then that little line from Alfred clues into all kinds of backstory and stuff that you know about the character. Mm-hmm. But if you're just a regular audience member, that's just a little bit of information that's kind of intriguing, right? Like, the father's in prison for killing the mother. Did he actually kill the mother? If he did kill the mother, like, what was going on? Like, why would he kill his wife, Barry Allen's mother? If he didn't kill the mother, why is he in prison? Like, either way, it's kind of really intriguing where you want to know that story. And it gives you this information that you're like, whoa, like, so Barry Allen has gone through some stuff.
Right.
You know, he has no mother. He's lost his mother, but he's also kind of lost his father, but in a different way. To me, it's like a really intriguing way to just plant a seed for the character, and then we'll get to see it and start to develop it more in the next scene.
Exactly. And in this scene, you know, even though we don't get a whole lot of detail, we just sort of get the basic overview of what happened to Barry. I think Bruce connects to that immediately because he definitely can relate to the fact that Barry has essentially been orphaned. Mm-hmm. And even though their circumstances were different, they both experienced this trauma in their childhood. So Bruce automatically, I think, relates to Barry in this moment. You know, he seems rather like shocked to hear that this happened to Barry. I also think that Alfred mentions that Barry was 9 when this happened. You know, he mentions that, you know, Barry always believed that his father was innocent, but he was 9, so no one believed him. And I think, I don't know if it was ever mentioned for certain, but I think that's probably around the same age that Bruce was when his parents died.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think like within a couple years or so, yeah.
Right.
But definitely the kind of like preteen, yeah, losing a parent like that. Exactly.
And I think, you can see this in the comics. I always see that Flash and Batman always get along surprisingly well. Because they have very different personalities, but I think they have some very similar trauma in their background, and they're both sort of scientifically minded individuals.
Yeah.
So there's a lot that connects the two of them.
Yeah. It seems like some of it was kind of untapped in this movie. Mm-hmm. 'Cause like as an audience, I feel like we get some good development for Barry and some good payoffs for his kind of backstory and stuff. But Bruce does not really have explicit connections to like the orphan angle that you were talking about, or the interest in science. I guess there's a little bit of a payoff to the interest in like technology and stuff, like with Bruce admiring the suit and all that, the Flash's suit that he made. So there's a little bit of that, but they definitely don't kind of connect on the emotional orphan kind of level.
Well, they don't elaborate on it much in this movie, but it's something that the audience knows. Like everybody knows Batman's origin story, like his background.
Right.
So you just sort of know that what Bruce must be thinking in this moment.
Right. And like we've talked about in our analysis of the movie, they're connected in the sense that they're both dealing with loss, and that theme runs throughout the whole movie. So that connects them. But yeah, they don't explicitly have them like, you know, have dialogue. You know, for the people that always want everything to be in dialogue, we don't have Bruce and Barry just talking about their mothers.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, but
that'll have to be for another film.
Yep. Cool. So then that's kind of Barry. The next one that gets referred to is Diana. So Bruce asks, what about Diana? I think it's funny how he kind of like walks away from Alfred and kind of he tries to nonchalantly just ask about Diana.
Yeah, he's
but
like,
Alfred kind of knows like, oh yeah, you're interested in whether she's might be part of this or not.
right. And it's kind of, I think, a continuation of this sort of implied attraction between Bruce and Diana in Batman v Superman.
Yeah.
It's a little bit less subtle here because you don't necessarily have to see it that way. I think even in this movie, they never go so far as to say that like these two have romantic feelings for each other and they're going to get together or anything. Like they just have a lot of chemistry. Mm-hmm. But they're in Batman v Superman, they had chemistry and they kind of danced around each other. It's a little bit more heavy here, I guess. Mm-hmm. Kind of funny, like kind of hinting that Bruce might actually have feelings for her. It never goes anywhere, but it feels like a continuation from the previous movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so. And Alfred, I think, is a good way to bring it forward between the two movies because of knowing Bruce and because of in BVS, like talking about how he kind of wishes that he would find a woman, to make him honest and stuff. So I think that is good connective tissue and it makes sense.
Right.
The handwritten note got a good laugh in the theaters that I was in, check yes or no, will you be Bruce's teammate, that kind of thing.
Same here.
I don't love that line, although the audience seemed to, but I do like the skill set line where he says, I'm just interested in her skill set. And he's like, I'm sure you are. Like to me, I like that second joke better than the first joke. Right.
It was funny to me, and you're right, it does seem like totally something like Alfred would do. He definitely ships it, I guess. And then you're right, I mean, even in the previous movie, he's very interested in Bruce's relationships, or, non-relationships as it is.
Yeah. And this one, I will say, like, there is a payoff here. Like, it's not just continuing from BVS, and it's not just kind of teasing it here. But I think about at the very end when they go into Wayne Manor and it's Bruce and Diana walking into it together and Alfred is like right behind him kind of smiling. Mm-hmm. And to me that moment at the end is a direct kind of payoff of this moment here where he's kind of teasing Bruce about, having some interest in Diana but not doing anything about it yet.
Right. And I actually talked about this on the DCEU Cinematic Minute. A lot of people are going to have very strong feelings about, the whole shipping thing, like who's in a relationship with who. For my part, I always like the idea of a Bruce and Diana romantic relationship. It happens sometimes in the comics. It's not super common, but it has a fan following. That being said, I don't really know if it would be a good thing to do in the movies just because it would be so divisive. Mm-hmm. But in any case, I feel like their relationship, whatever it is a very good one, especially in these movies, because Bruce and Diana, I think they're shown to have very similar and complementary temperaments. Like they're both very intelligent, they're both very wise about the ways of the world. So the two of them work really well together, and they're essentially the co-leads of this movie. Mm-hmm. The film, I think, walks the line of suggesting that there could be some kind of attraction between them, but never really going there. And I think that might be good to satisfy both sides, pro Wonder Bat, anti Wonder Bat. Mm-hmm. Kind of feels like they're throwing the Wonder Bat fans a bone, but not really committing.
Yeah. No, I agree with all of that. And I think it's a good call that they've planted some seeds for it, but they pushed it down to the future because like this movie came out only a few months after Wonder Woman, and so if Wonder Woman had this really kind of great thing between Steve and Diana, it seems like it would be weird to just a few months later like put Diana into another relationship. So I think it's definitely the right call for the reasons you said, and to just let the Steve Diana thing have longer, period of time for it to just sink into,
be appreciated.
Yeah, be appreciated, and to like let the audience fully like digest it and kind of be ready to move on a few films in the future.
Right. And nothing against romantic relationships in movies. It's just, I think, as a subplot, romantic relationships kind of tend to take up, I guess, like a lot of space in a movie. So these characters have, it's like Gal Gadot said, she has more important things to be worrying about right now than dating. Yeah. Wonder Woman actually did I mean, it was a little hint, that the beginning and end of the movie, she gets the original print of the photo from Bruce. So it does kind of show there's a continuation between Batman v Superman, Wonder Woman, and then this film of her and Bruce working together. Mm-hmm. So it's just kind of a thread that's connecting everything together.
Yeah. So let's go to the last part here of the scene, which is Victor Stone. So we get a little bit of exposition, a first little tease of the character, besides what we saw in BVS. But for Justice League here, mentions genius IQ. So we know, like, all right, we're dealing with somebody who's like whip smart, he's not just athletic, but he also has a lot of smarts to go with that. It's scholarship to GCU, Gotham City University, and the photos that are shown show Vic in football situations, like with his football, pads on and uniform on and everything. I thought that was a really great choice because he's this human, but he is surrounded by these pads and a helmet and this kind of technology and gear like attached right to his body. And so to me, that's kind of a nice foreshadowing of him as Cyborg, when he will have these all of it will be these metal apparatus and stuff, or not really metal, but, apocalyptic technology. So we see kind of this human rudimentary tech in the form of football pads and helmet. And then we'll see the apocalyptic technology that's a much more advanced technology, but it's still taking the place of his body, and you kind of just see his face as the only thing exposed.
Right, and I could see that, and I kind of think this is probably the intent in the comics as well, but, here they emphasize that, you're right, and he's not just athletic, he's also very intelligent, so that actually, it makes him feel a lot like a cyborg even before he became one. He's got both the physical strength and sort of an intelligent computing mind.
Mm-hmm. And I think that it's important too because it shows later on when he's gaining these new powers and he's having to go through lots of information and figure out, how to use his new powers. It's not just that anybody could have, gotten created by the Mother Box and then become Cyborg. He had to have the intelligence to be able to like think through and work through all of the stuff that the Mother Box is trying to like send through his brain and like through his body, Mm-hmm. So yeah, like maybe somebody else could have been like a version of Cyborg, but only Vic Stone could be the version of Cyborg that we got. Like he brought some of himself still into it to process what was going on and to deal with, like, adapt to the changes. That's like a form of intelligence, to be able to adapt to some new situations or to something new that's thrust upon you and like, oh, I can deal with it. I can figure out what's going on and try to move forward with it. Like that's a form of intelligence that he has and is able to, eventually use. There's some growing pains and stuff.
That's Borg life, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So he can interface with it. It's he can make the most use of those powers, I think, more than any person. Because every superhero they're more than just their powers. They're usually exemplary for some other reason, either before or despite their powers.
Mm-hmm. And one thing that's maybe people have seen online, but we'll just mention it here because they say that he was playing football for Gotham City University. So Ray Fisher did confirm that Vic was a star for Gotham City University's football team, but then his accident is what led to GCU really getting much worse at football. And so in BVS, we saw GCU getting blown out by Metropolis. And Ray Fisher said, like, that was not just an accident. That was actually planned to show that GCU was floundering without their star, Vic Stone.
Right, and this was later confirmed by Snyder as well in a Vero post.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's cool to just see even little details like that of just, like, the score of the football game. They actually thought about, like, putting a little bit of extra meaning behind that score. I like stuff like that.
Right, because I remember in Batman v Superman, when I first saw that football scene, I thought we might see a cameo of Victor.
I thought so
but
too.
Of course, since that happened after his accident, they were more trying to show that this is what happened to GCU's team after Victor supposedly died.
Right. Yeah, like, at the time, I thought maybe we would see Vic there as a tease of Cyborg. Mm-hmm. But then when I didn't see Vic in it, I thought, oh, it's not Cyborg related. I thought maybe it was just showing that, like, Gotham is the downtrodden city and Metropolis is like the shining, city, shimmering city on the hill. So I thought it was
well, it
just
is also that.
you know, yeah, I guess it is also that, yeah. But it's nice
Right,
to have multiple.
it's multi-layered.
Yeah, like Zack Snyder just said on Vero that he loves double meanings to things. So,
and we love them too.
And then the last little bit here is, Alfred says, and he delivers it very crisply, deceased. Now, we take that to mean that, according to public records, he's deceased. But we think that Bruce and Alfred have kind of some indication or some information that says, like, he might still be alive in some form, and that's why they're looking for him still. So I take it as, like, publicly, he has been listed as deceased.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because otherwise, their wording here is a little bit strange. Because it's, despite what they've seen from this footage in Batman v Superman, they kind of seem to pretend here that they don't know any of that. Or maybe it's that the Batman v Superman footage doesn't imply that he survived whatever it is his father did to him with the mother box.
Mm-hmm.
But they just kind of seem very confused, like kind of like they're starting over from square one instead of building off of what we saw in Batman v Superman.
Yeah, I take it as, they saw that clip from BVS and they have him on their list, their short list of people that they're trying to find, because I think they suspect or have a little bit of information that he might have, this technological power. But I think Alfred's just kind of reporting, like, the status of Vic Stone in the, like, newspaper record and stuff is that he's deceased.
Right.
Yeah. I like the deceased angle, too, because that literally brings in the idea of death, and so then Cyborg is kind of like a rebirth, and I think that connects Cyborg to Superman. And the filmmakers, I think, were also thinking of this because at the very end, it's Superman and Cyborg that say to each other, like, I actually like being alive. Right, so they say that because they've actually, like, had brushes with death.
Exactly, and both come back, I guess, stronger for it.
Yep.
It does still seem like, I don't know for certain, but it does seem like there could be maybe a tiny bit of retconning. Once again, I couldn't say, but
yeah.
It does seem suspect that we don't actually see the BVS Cyborg footage here, even though we do see little bits of the Aquaman and Flash footage.
Yeah, and Alessandro, like, he was definitely keying in on this as suspecting a retcon of Cyborg. For me, I don't get the retcon from this scene, but later on, it does get a little bit messy, like trying to line up BVS with Justice League for Cyborg's angle. But for me in this scene, I'm kind of fine with it. I'm like, yeah, you can have other images of Cyborg up. That's fine. It doesn't have to always be exactly the same stuff from BVS. But later on, there seems to be some discrepancies about, like, how Cyborg looks before the Mother Box incident.
Right, and they could just be talking about it the way that they do because, like with Flash, maybe they're just holding out for more information.
Yeah.
A confirmation of what happened.
Right. Now, the last little beat here is where Alfred makes another kind of joke, dry humor, where he says one misses the days where one's biggest concern was exploding wind-up penguins. So a nice little reference to Penguin there. Mm-hmm. But also just, this kind of Alfred making a dry comment about, like, we're kind of going into some uncharted territory here, like we're heading forward into some new challenges.
Although it's already weird that we're dealing with exploding wind-up penguins. It's not like that happens everywhere.
Yeah, as if that's like a very normal, common kind of occurrence.
Yeah, so their reference for what's normal is a little off. But I do love that that's another line that suggests a larger, more established universe for these characters.
Yeah, like we don't get anything as explicit or visual as, like, the Robin suit to refer to, like, the 20-year history, but we do get this kind of dialogue of, like, oh, in that 20-year history, the Penguin was involved in some of that.
Right.
Yeah, so that's...
great references there, and, definitely something to expand upon in the future.
Yep. And then that little bit of dry humor leads to a more of a kind of meaningful comment from Alfred. We're not only dealing with the parademons, but now we're also trying to recruit, this Aquaman guy, this Flash guy, this Cyborg guy. We're becoming sort of semi-friends with Diana, maybe. So this, it makes sense that Alfred would be like, I don't recognize this world, right? Like, the threats are different, and the people that we're maybe trying to team up with are metahumans. So this is a very different kind of world.
Yeah, so that leads to, Bruce's response. You don't need to recognize it, just need to save it. And, like we said at the beginning of this episode, that's definitely a major theme of this movie. It seems like thematically it syncs with the Wonder Woman film very well.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a definite sign of Bruce's development as a character.
Yeah, and I think, we've talked about this saving the world, or like, is the world worth saving? Yes, it is, even with its flaws and stuff. We've talked about this as being a Justice League universe theme, like across all the movies. And I think that case could be made pretty convincingly, that in all of the movies, there's kind of, the question is raised, like, is this world worth saving? And then it's always answered, yes, it is. Even though we've seen some of the negative things, we've seen some stuff that's hard for even the audience to kind of digest, because it's not always like good, happy stuff that you're seeing, but it's realistic. But at the end, it's always affirmative, like, yes, we do want to save the world. Right.
I mean, it's a superhero story, so, it's always about the saving people.
Yeah.
And it's kind of incredible for Bruce, because especially responding to what Alfred said, Alfred is expressing that, things are changing, and Bruce is showing that he's embracing change, or he's coming to understand it. In Batman v Superman, he was all, the world only makes sense if you force it to. All of his actions were about trying to impose some kind of order on the world, to make the world make sense.
Mm-hmm.
But now he's become much more open.
Mm-hmm.
Much more open to things that are, different situations.
Yeah. And to me, I also think about how, like, when they're saying, all right, yeah, we are going to save the world, there's kind of different ways to think about that. And this, to me, connects to, like, the reality of, like, what we're dealing with in our actual world here. Like, when you see some negativity in the world, but you realize, oh, it's still worth saving, does that mean we want to save it for the future and continue to progress and try to, like, make the world better than it was in the past? Or is it like, I want to go back to how things were before? Like Alfred kind of saying, like, hey, remember when we just were dealing with this, and I don't recognize this new stuff. Some people, I think they have a tendency that they want to go back. Like, they want to go back to the feeling of comfort before they realized some of the things that actually go on. But others are more like the, let's move forward. And yeah, there are some problems, some negativity, violence, anger, but we want to move forward through it and get to a new place that's better, like out in the future.
Right.
So for me, this movie takes the kind of more progressive one, like, well, and I think Wonder Woman too. It's like, yeah, we recognize some of this negativity, but let's have hope and optimism in, like, what it could be in the future. So it's more of a kind of forward-leaning kind of, like, saving of the world.
Right. And I think it even takes a step forward, because Wonder Woman was, about accepting the world as it is and still choosing to have hope and be positive. And this film takes it a step further, which is, accepting the world as it is, but also accepting change.
Mm-hmm.
Bruce, before, he definitely had an underlying fear and hatred of, I guess you could say, metahumans in general. He only knew about Superman, but Superman was different, something he couldn't predict, and that scared and angered him. But now he realizes that, Superman, he was different, but he can also save the world. So he's embracing a new way of being a hero. So it's beyond even just accepting the world as it is. It's accepting that it's going to change, and that's going to make the world better.
All right, I think that does it for us on Justice League Scene 6. Next up, we're going to switch back over to Wonder Woman and make some more progress over there. But thanks so much for listening. Hope you enjoyed it. And thanks also to the Suicide Squadcast and Man of Steel Answers.